On this edition of the Table of Content, Michael and I will review The King and His Hawk, a short story by James Baldwin, and look at the theme of anger and the consequences that come from it. Stay tuned, that's coming up next, right here on the Table of Content. Welcome. Thank you so much for tuning in to this edition of the Table of Content. My name is Albert Sines. I am one of your hosts, and I am joined with such pleasure with Michael Steele. Michael Steele, welcome aboard.
Thank you, Albert. It's always a joy to be here as well and talking about these stories.
So, as I said, we're reviewing The King and His Hawk by James Baldwin. If this is an unfamiliar story to you, please venture over to our website, weareoneBodyaudiotheater.org or WAOBaudiotheater.org. Look up in the Door-to-Door Storytellers, The King and His Hawk, or you can find it at our YouTube channel for WAOB Audio Theater and give it a listen and then come back for this episode. So I always like asking sort of interesting questions in the beginning. We've got a story that's revolving around Genghis Khan, and he had this hunting hawk. I've never seen one of these things in person. So they've been used for centuries, maybe millennia, and people still use these hunting hawks, and they just sort of land perfectly on your hand, and they go out and do amazing things like, I don't know, bring back small animals, I guess. Have you ever seen this in person? I've never seen this in person. I've just seen videos.
Right. I can't say that I have. I grew up in the desert, and there was this sort of nature area, that you could visit, and they had a visitor center. And I think I remember one of the rangers having a red-tailed hawk perched on her arm. She had the big, thick leather glove, but the hawk itself wasn't a trained hunter. It was just kind of there for, come meet, the red-tailed hawk and learn about the red-tailed hawk. But no, I've only seen videos, but they're impressive when they do hunt.
I think you made a point, and this is going to be a fun factoid for the people. You said a red-tailed hawk.
Yep.
So like when you watch like some sort of epic, some like movie scene, they're outdoors, and they have a bald eagle, and the bald eagle lets out its call.
Yes.
That's not actually a bald eagle. They actually use the call or the sound from a red-tailed hawk.
Oh, right.
And if you actually listen to the bald eagle, it's much less majestic sounding. Its actual call compared to the red-tailed hawk. So I was completely floored when I discovered that recently. And I think a lot of people would feel kind of like, what? It's not actually an eagle, and it's not an eagle. That they use the red-tailed hawk.
Interesting. And now that you say that, it is. Having grown up in the desert and heard red-tailed hawks, the screech is the same. And then I think I've heard a bald eagle recording or something, and they kind of sound like glorified seagulls. No offense to any bald eagles in our area.
No offense to bald eagles, and no offense to America and the patriots that hold the bald eagle in high esteem. But that's fair. That's a fair comment.
That's right. Yeah.
So, anyways, in this story, we have Genghis Khan, and he, we all kind of know he was this sort of huge warrior king from long ago, and he was out, I guess, hunting, I guess you could say. It says in the story, he rode out into the woods to have a day's sport, and many of his friends were with him, and they were carrying their bows and arrows, and the servants and the hounds were all there. So it's this huge, glorious hunting party, and he took with him his favorite hawk, it says in the story. For in those days, hawks were trained to hunt. At a word from their masters, they would fly high up into the air and look around for prey. If they chanced to see a deer or a rabbit, they would swoop down upon it, swift as any arrow. So this all sounds really cool, and it's like, okay, just everyone's going out to basically go hunt. Maybe not completely different from today's hunting parties. Everyone gets together, they go out, and they have a
Yeah.
good time.
Yeah.
But
Hopes are high.
hopes are high, right? And especially when you have your favorite hawk with you.
Yes.
So maybe one day I will have a favorite hawk. But he the story progresses, and to sort of get to the summary of it, so that we can kind of open it up a bit more. Genghis Khan gets thirsty, and his hawk was out flying around, and he sees where he's going to drink some water, and it's trickling down from a higher point, and he tries to take a drink, and the hawk just sort of swoops down and interferes, because he had like a little cup, and he got in the way. So
Right.
he sort of
Yeah.
brushed it off, and he tried again, and the hawk did this again, and then the hawk did it again. And basically what happens is the hawk is not letting him drink out of this cup, and Genghis Khan gets angry, and he's like, this is not okay. And even though this is his favorite hawk, he says in the story, he says, how do you dare to act so? He cried. If I had you in my hands, I would wring your neck. So, and he filled the cup again, and he tried to drink, but then he drew his sword, because he was basically luring the hawk in. So the hawk came, and then he basically killed the hawk, right?
Yeah.
So then after all that settles down, and he feels like he's vindicated for his, actions, for the actions that the hawk took against him, he
Right.
decides to climb up, because he can't find his cup now. So he climbs up to where the water was coming, and what does he find? He finds a massively poisonous snake that had died right in where the stream was. So the water was basically poisoned, and the hawk was trying to save the king, save Genghis Khan from drinking poison. So then, of course, as in many times, there is remorse for the action. And he says, the hawk saved my life, he cried, and how did I repay him? He was my best friend, and I have killed him. He clambered down the bank, he took the bird up gently and laid it in his hunting bag. Then he mounted his horse and rode swiftly home. He said to himself, I have learned a sad lesson today, and that is never to do anything in anger. In story, exit stage left, close curtain. There we are. So where do you start from there, Michael Steele?
Right. I have a couple of thoughts. The first is I tried to put myself, ironically, and I've never done this before, because the story is all from the perspective of Genghis Khan and what he's suffering. And then the big reveal moment, like, oh, the motive of the hawk. But I tried to put myself in the perspective of the hawk. And I just thought, now that, the hawk is not acting, consciously, but he is trying to do something good, that is, save the life of his master. And what is he met with? He's met with ingratitude. He's met with anger, and ultimately he's met with the taking of his own life. And for me, that whole story, the unfolding of the bird, it just screams injustice. Like, what an injustice. Like, here's a bird that's trying to save the life of its master, and the master, ends up killing it. Of course, we can go into other things about the motive of the master. The master, Genghis Khan didn't understand the motives of the hawk, right? So there's a little bit of like understanding there. That was the first point. Second point was, it's a story about anger, and the lesson is, don't act out of anger. And it got me thinking about what anger is. And again, St. Thomas Aquinas would say that anger is a hybrid of two other emotions. It's one, sadness at a perceived injustice, and hope for overcoming that injustice. And we see that at play in Genghis Khan. He's sad and angry and upset because he wants a drink of water, and he's not getting that drink of water, and he is looking at the hawk as being out of line completely with what the hawk is supposed to do, which is go and get prey, and that's it, right? And then in his mind, he's trying to act, to overcome that injustice, which is rather dire for the hawk. He just dispatches him, and so there is a lesson to be learned there. And it's interesting. St. Thomas Aquinas would go on to say that how to deal with anger: don't act while you're angry, precisely because there's that perception of injustice. We are more often than not the worst judges of justice and injustice, especially when it pertains to offenses against ourselves, right? So the idea is don't act, cool off, have time to reflect, put yourself in the other person's shoes, and then even if necessary, get a third party involved for a more objective view. But anyways, those were a couple of the thoughts I had. Also, at the very beginning, it's contrasted. Like Genghis Khan isn't, he's not portrayed in this story as an angry person either. Spirits were high. They were in a merry mood, and it took him like 4 tries for him finally to get his anger up. So it wasn't like he was just like a fuse ready to blow at any moment. It was just, there was a repeated offense. So those are a couple of thoughts that came to mind.
I appreciated what you were talking about St. Thomas and basically the concept to not act out of anger or to do things out of anger. So it had me thinking about, a lot of the saints have similar concepts, like St. Ignatius of Loyola and his, the spiritual exercises and, you're in a point of desolation and consolation. Like, don't make a decision when you're in a place of desolation, So a lot of this, all kind of wraps together. When we are in a negative place, it's probably not the best place to make huge actions, huge decisions, judgments. We should probably wait till we can either be calm, be in a better place, have better mental faculties. It just seems to lend itself from the perspective of the saints that you'll do better in your life if you do things when you're happy, when you're peaceful, when you're calm.
Right.
And just hold on just a little bit
Right.
before you kill your favorite hawk.
Right. When you have clarity, because you might not be seen with the same perspective. You might not be seen from an eagle eye perspective, at 30,000 feet, Yeah, it is so great.
But I couldn't help but think about this, right? So there's this object of thirst, right? So let's see, where is it in the story? The king rode slowly along. He had once seen a spring of clear water near this pathway, if he could only find it now, but the hot days of summer had dried up all the mountain brooks. So, one of these themes that, we're presented with also in the story that I couldn't help but sort of think about was this object of thirst, right? And, it says in the story, it took a long time to fill the cup, and the king was so thirsty that he could hardly wait. At last it was nearly full. He put the cup to his lips and was about to drink. And I think we can all sort of relate to like a hot day and you've been out all day and you just want that first sort of cold drink, and that feeling that comes down. So, we understand what it's like to be really thirsty and then you're about to be able to drink something and you can't, or something interferes, or you have to wait a little longer. And what my mind was going to is I was thinking about the Israelites and the story from Exodus, and they sort of leave Egypt. They're out into the desert, and they have to sort of wander for 40 years, right? And it's not easy, and it's a long time, and along the way they kind of are very they're very begrudging of the situation.
Right.
And, and I think Father Dave Pavanka put it really good once. I heard him in a talk, and he was talking about freedom. And he was saying how the Israelites are basically saying, hey, we're tired of your manna. We're tired of what you've given us. We kind of had it better before,
Right.
Where thanks a lot, God, for... And God's taking care of them, God's taking care of them. No, it's not, it's not bacon wrapped, filet mignon with ice cold drinks, but he's given them food from heaven, right? From
Right.
from heaven. And but they can't handle it. They want to fill their bellies with something else. They want
Yeah.
to they want something better to eat, something better to drink, but they continue through this suffering for all of these years, but God has said,
Right.
I will give you something better in return, right?
Mm.
But
Mm-hmm.
what happens whenever the Israelites don't listen to God, they kind of get in trouble, right?
Yeah.
That
Right.
when they get frustrated, when they get angry with God, God sort of responds and they sort of have to pay the price.
Yeah.
But finally, they do get rewarded in the end. And I think you take from that like if you just wait, if you are patient, if you don't get angry with God,
Yeah.
good things will come. And if Genghis Khan in the story had just tried to sort of figure out what was going on, if he had tried to sort of work with the hawk a little bit, right? There
Mm.
wouldn't have been this tragic end. He would not have killed his favorite hawk. There wouldn't be this sadness of losing, his great friend, the hawk.
Right. And you make a great point about the comparison with the Israelites and their relationship with God, right? What is it about us as humans? Like, we are never satisfied, And I think there have been other fairy tales written about that, where people are blessed with some magical wish or something or other, and they're not satisfied with it. So they keep stretching or wanting more. And that just kind of feeds the greed. Instead of the opposite, being truly grateful for what we have. And you're right, that's a good point that the story brings out. It was not easy for Genghis Khan to get this cup of water. It wasn't like he could just dip into a stream. It was just like a trickle dripping down from the rock. So it took a long time. He had to exercise patience for his reward of a nice, cool drink. And his expectation was all on that drink, which kind of exacerbates the situation, right? Because it's one thing, it's like, oh, the hawk knocked a cup out of my hand, I'll just dip it back into this deep pool. No, he's like, the effort and the patience and the weight all kind of were eating at him.
Right, right.
So all elements, which I feel like also point to the fact that the story is trying to convey that Genghis Khan wasn't, again, like this irrational, angry person, right? He was like, there's a certain kind of build up to his anger. Like, wouldn't you be angry if that happened to you, right? And yeah, and he's blinded. He's blinded by his anger. But and I was also thinking, as you were talking about the Israelites, how God treats us as well. He kind of, he lets us suffer the consequences of our own impatient and bad choices. And then, as a good father, he's always there when we come whimpering back to him, not like in a way like, see, I told you so, but yeah, I'm still here. I'm sorry that was a hard lesson that you had to learn.
Right.
But
Exactly.
He's always filled with compassion and kindness, yeah, I feel like, through the story, I hope that, obviously Genghis Khan went home a sadder but wiser man.
But our story, our own story with God is one of such, I guess society as a whole, really, right? We are an instant gratification society.
Oh my goodness.
I want it now.
Yeah.
What have we done? We've given ourselves the convenience of being able to just drive a few minutes and suddenly we're in a walled building that has vegetables and canned food and meats and everything else that we need, and it's air conditioned. And
Right.
my wife, she has a book written by Laura Ingram Wilder, the one who wrote the Little House on the Prairie series.
Oh, right. Yes.
And in this book, Laura actually tells of her own actual life in a lot of different stories and essays that she wrote of what it was like. And they were up north, and it was rough. And there was not, it wasn't a hop on down to the local, the local mega mart and just, have at will. Like, they had to work for what they had. They had to work hard. They had to wait. There was, the seasons,
Yeah.
the winter was
Yes.
bad, maybe there was no water. I mean, it was rough. But now it's all like, yeah, we have a computer that we, hold in our hands and make phone calls
Yeah.
with, and
Yeah.
there it is. I've got exactly what I need. So I think we, as a society, that's us, but especially sometimes as Christians with God, we're like, hey, God, I need some help. Like, where are you?
Mm-hmm.
I'm suffering. And
Mm-hmm.
and like you said, God's like, I'm sorry that it's kind of rough, but there is a reason for this. And I am with you. I am
Mm-hmm.
here. And that, what is that short story that someone made, like the two people are walking along in the sand, and one person is talking to Jesus, and there's two sets of footsteps, and he says, hey, well, why'd you leave in that hard point of my life? He's like, no, I
Right.
wasn't. I didn't leave. That's where I carried you, right?
Right.
But we want to feel it. We want to feel with, absolute clarity the presence of the Lord in our lives. And if we don't, then we get angry, and then we act out, and then we sort of screw up and we mess up, and then God's like, hey, I'm right here. I'm right
Right.
here. But it's just how we act in our life. If we don't feel God, then we feel like he's just not there. If he doesn't answer our prayers right away, well, God's just
Mm-hmm.
not listening.
Right. Right. We're impatient. Right. Yeah. I think that that's what you talked about in the beginning, that if we could somehow learn patient endurance of trials and hardships, there's wisdom in that, and like, yeah, it's a tough moment, but like you were saying earlier, if we had that confidence of like God hasn't abandoned us, he's actually carrying us through those moments, that bolsters our hope, or ought to bolster our hope, and as a side, interestingly enough, I have a little bit of a story to share about Laura Ingalls Wilder's home in 2016. When we moved out here to southwestern Pennsylvania, we did a coast to coast road trip, and we actually camped a night on the little house on the prairie. It's a historic museum and visitor center, and you can go and just pay like $12, I think it was, just to pitch a tent right there on the property. And so we camped there, and this was in the middle of summer, smack dab in the middle of the prairie, and it was cold. It was really cold. And I'm thinking, this is whatever. This is July. We're here in middle July, and like the morning temperature I think was in the 30s. Like, and this is like the nice time of year. And just kind of a taste of what they went through. It was great fun for the kids as well. They had got to do some of the projects that Laura Ingalls did when she was a little girl. But great experience, unforgettable experience.
I was thinking about all of this, and in the midst of, right now, we are
Mm,
going through the Lenten season,
mm,
and it seems, I think, for many of us, these sort of 40 days, right? We talked about the Israelites in the 40 years, and Christ went out into the desert for 40 days, and here we are. We have our own 40 days, and for many of us, it really does seem, right, like this long sort of uh, in enduring, you know,
yeah,
Lent,
right.
Lent,
Yeah.
and but this year, right, talk with my wife, and we're always trying to sort of make our Lent better, and that might seem very odd to people. It's like, what? How do you have a
Mm,
good Lent? You have to sacrifice and give up, but trying to look at it from the standpoint of growth, right?
mm,
That this time of sort of sacrifice can end actually on a good note. It can lead to something better.
right.
And if Genghis Khan in the story had sort of worked through his thirst and not sort of been so angry, had tried to work out, right? He would have come out better on the other side. Like I said earlier, he wouldn't have
Mm,
killed his hawk, right? If he had somehow tried to figure this out.
right.
But we look at this, we look at those stretches of suffering, like this time of like sort of forcible, you know, forcible sacrifice during the Lenten season. You're like, oh, why do I have
Right.
to do
Yeah.
this? It's like because it's good for us. It's
Right.
good for us. It's
It
better for
is.
us. And in the story, Genghis Khan, it would have been. I mean, I guess he reaped sort of the benefits because he didn't drink poison water, but at the expense of losing his favorite hawk. So it's kind of like you
Right.
win, like he won and lost. But in in our Christian lives, it can be a win. It can be all win if we can work with God, be patient with God, not be angry with God, and
Yes.
and accept what it is that He's giving us, like what it is, like these
Yes.
trials. Like many times, God will knock things out of our hands, and we're like, "Hey, I
Right.
was going to drink that,"
Yeah,
and God's like,
exactly.
You really don't want to drink that." It's like,
Yeah.
"Yes, I do, God," and He
Right.
knocks it out of our hand again. You're like, "Hey, yo, I'm
Yeah.
going to
Yeah.
drink that." It's like, you really don't want to drink that. And we force it upon ourselves, right? And we
Yes.
drink out of the cup and, oh man, it was poison. And
Yeah.
like, God, I'm so sorry. It's like, I know. I tried to tell you. But thankfully, we have a merciful God.
Yeah. I like where you're going with that. Let us not slay the hawks in our lives. Well, actually, maybe even let's try to understand and identify the hawks in our lives that are sort of there to help us, but at the same time, they're bothering us, but it's
Right,
like you were saying,
exactly.
it's there for our good, right? And like you were saying, yeah, isn't that what sin is? It's basically, okay, God, I know what's better for me than you do. You're the creator of the universe. You made me who I am. You know every hair on my head, but I know for myself what's better for me than you at this particular moment. So please don't knock the cup out of my hand. And yeah, I feel like we could, like you were saying earlier, it could be a better scenario. We could go home with an alive hawk and wiser and grateful if we just kind of like see through the pain or whatever's bothering us and try to learn the lesson or try to change what needs to be changed. Yeah. I like where you took that.
And I like what you said, that we need to find the hawk. We need to recognize the hawks in our life, because I'm sure we have them. We have the hawks in our life that are there for our benefit, but we just don't recognize it. So I
Hmm.
appreciate that point.
Yeah.
I am not a perfect person by any means. I
I don't
struggle.
believe it.
I well, I am not a perfect person. I am not a perfect person, and I'm a sinful man, like pretty much we all are, right? I mean, we are
Yeah.
all fallen creatures,
Yep.
and we're all sinful in different ways, And I have the moments where I get angry, you know what, and then
Yeah.
you see the consequences of that anger afterwards, and it weighs on you, it weighs on me,
It
So
does.
I I guess what I'm trying to get at is that none of us are sort of exempt from the thing that sort of is like Genghis Khan's anger, right? So maybe it is
Hmm.
anger, maybe it's something else, it's some other sort of vice, some other sort of negative feeling, some other reaction that leads to bad consequences. There's something in our lives, right? But I think
Hmm.
that what we take away from here is that, like we said in the beginning, to not respond out of anger. That God doesn't want us
Yeah.
to respond out of anger. I think He
No.
understands anger. I think God understands anger,
Yeah.
but He doesn't want us to respond to it, because there's more benefit from responding out of the place of peace, out of a place of clear mental faculties, out of a
Right.
place where we know that there's better resolution in the end. So I
Right.
think what we take away from here is that in our lives we will do a lot better when we sort of try to squelch our anger. I'm not
Mm.
saying don't get angry, because it's sort of an impossible task. It's like telling people, well, just don't breathe. We
Right.
we, we, we just we just
It's
get angry at times. It
yeah.
happens because we are fallen creatures.
Yeah.
But in those times, wait for the anger to pass, and I think that we will not have to worry about killing our hawk,
Right.
and then we'll be able to actually enjoy a better drink than the
Yeah.
than the poison water.
Right. Right. Yeah. St. Thomas Aquinas, you brought up a good point that he says anger as an emotion. He says, what are emotions? They're psychosomatic responses to stimuli that we suffer, which basically meaning psychosomatic is just a fancy way of saying they affect our soul and our body. So when we're angry, heart rate goes up, we sweat or we get red, et cetera, et cetera. Um, so he says, because we suffer them, their responses to stimuli that we don't necessarily have control over. So we suffer them. We don't elicit them usually, and what we do have control over is how we react with respect to them when they arise, and that's what shapes us as human beings. And if like you were saying, some of the saints who are known for their gentleness were the ones who struggled the most with temptations to anger. I'm thinking of like Saint Francis de Sales. He was known for being this meek and mild person, and yet he struggled all his life with severe temptations to anger. Um, you know, but yeah, it's that. Don't act out of anger. Don't kind of suppress it. That's not healthy. But the idea is,
Sure.
you know, divert it, uplift it to God, who sees everything with perfect clarity. And wait. Don't act. Let yourself cool off. Say a prayer. Take a walk.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, lots of good things to think about, and I think we can all sort of emerge from here, wanting to give strong consideration to how we respond in those moments. But Michael Steele, thanks so much for taking some time to talk about the king and his hawk.
Thank you, Albert. Yeah, you've got me interested. I might look up like local falconry classes in my area.
Just remember, if it knocks a cup out of your hand, just be calm.
That's right. Yeah, I'll keep my sword in its sheath.
Very, 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 very good. I'm sure it'll be safer for everyone if you just keep the sword in the sheath. Ladies and gentlemen, again, if you have not listened to The King and His Hawk, please go find it on our website or at our YouTube channel for waobaudiotheater.org. As always, we are so happy to have you on board as we open up these stories a little bit more for discussion, and we hope that you will join us for the next episode. And until then, as always, please be good, stay safe, peace.